The wildest day of my life started with my nephew screaming in the middle of a busy sidewalk, chasing a rich white man in a gray suit, grabbing his jacket and yelling, "Don't leave me again!" And in the next minute, that same millionaire dropped. His expensive briefcase fell to his knees and broke down, crying in front of everybody, when my nephew repeated one single sentence that only his dead son was supposed to know. You ever watch a person who thinks they control everything, suddenly realize they don't even know their own family, their own history, their own blood? Not really. Yeah, that happened, and somehow I ended up right in the center of it. So my name is Tiana, and if you saw me on any regular morning, you probably wouldn't look twice. I'm that woman with flour on her arms and dark circles under her eyes, hustling between a tiny bakery on Maple and 3rd, and whatever side job I can pick up. Shoes a little worn out, uniform a little faded, phone full of overdue bill reminders. You know what I mean? But I've got this 5-year-old boy, my nephew Jaden, who I call Jay, and he is the loudest, bravest, most stubborn little hurricane I've ever met. And for 5 years, it was just me and him against the world. People see a black woman with a kid and no wedding ring, and they think they already know the story. Some guy left some bad decisions, probably looking for a handout. They never imagine the truth could be something a lot messier and a lot more expensive than anything money can fix. The truth for us started the night my sister Lena died, and honestly, I still feel that night. Every time I close my eyes, she was pregnant and glowing and nervous and so stupidly in love with this guy named Daniel. She used to tell me about him in bits and pieces, how his family was wealthy, old school, strict in that, "We care about the family name more than your happiness." Way how his father was this powerful businessman who liked control more than people. And I remember teasing her saying, "Girl, you sure you want those problems?" And she'd just smile and say, "He's worth it, T. We'll figure it out. He'll tell his dad when the time is right." The time never came because one night I got a call, and it felt like the world just slid off its axis. Car accident. Daniel was gone before they could get him to the hospital. The shock sent my sister into labor, and by sunrise I was standing in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and heartbreak, holding a tiny crying baby, while a doctor avoided my eyes and said, "I'm sorry," in that practiced, careful tone that nurses use when they've said it so many times, it barely sounds like a real sentence anymore. My sister never woke up, so everything she knew about that man, about his father, about that whole life died with her. And it was suddenly just me and this baby, and a stack of forms I wasn't ready to sign when they asked about the father's family. I had a first name and a lot of question marks. That's it. I named the baby Jaden because she'd written that name in a notebook with little hearts around it, and I took him home in a second-hand car seat that a neighbor's cousin let me borrow, promising myself I'd figure it out somehow. For a while, figuring it out just meant diapers. Formula sleepless nights, ugly crying on the bathroom floor, and fake smiles when people said, "He looks just like you." And I wanted to scream, "No, he looks like the man who never even got to hold him." It wasn't until Jaden was maybe 2 that I found the letters. I was cleaning out one of Lena's old boxes full of receipts and concert tickets, and folded up memories when I found a little bundle of envelopes tucked inside a hoodie, all addressed to her in the same slanted handwriting, and I sat there on the floor of my tiny kitchen baby monitor, buzzing next to me reading. This man pour his heart out on paper. First letter, he's excited about the baby, but scared his father will explode if he finds out. Second letter, he's arguing with his dad saying he wants to live his own life. Love who he loves, have his child without being treated like a failure. And then the third letter, the one that still makes my chest tight, dated 2 days before he died, where he wrote, "If anything happens to me, take our baby to my father. Show him this letter. He is strict, but he will protect the baby. He'll know what to do." I remember sitting there, fingers shaking, thinking, all right then, I guess I know what I'm supposed to do. And it sounded simple in my head. Go find the man, show him the letters, put our pride in the back seat, and do right by this baby. But life doesn't really care about what sounds simple in your head. It took me months to track down the father. Not in person. Of course, men like that don't just pop up at the grocery store. I found him in business articles and charity photos. The name Richard Hale under picture after picture. White hair, razor-sharp jaw, suits that probably cost more than my rent for a month, eyes like he was always bored or irritated or both. And every caption said something like, powerful, strict, demanding, basically confirming everything my sister had hinted at. One day, I finally worked up the nerve. I put Jaden in his stroller, slipped the letters into a cheap plastic folder, took a deep breath, and used the last of my cash to get us out to his neighborhood. I swear, the air changes. When you pass a certain kind of money, the trees look more expensive. Even the dogs look like they have health insurance. We turned a corner, and there it was. Long driveway, manicured lawn, a gate so tall it might as well have been a wall between our world and his, and a security guard in front, who was already looking at me like I was a problem before I even opened my mouth. I need to speak to Mr. Hale, I said, folder clutched in my hand, voice trying so hard not to shake. It's about his son. I will never forget the way that guard's eyes slid from my face to my skin, to my cheap sneakers, to the stroller, and then back up like he'd already decided I was some kind of scam before hearing a word. Ma'am, you can't be here, he said, flat as concrete. If you're looking for donations, there are forms online. I told him, I'm not here for money. I'm here because my sister had his grandchild. I tried to show him the letters, but he barely glanced at the paper. He stepped closer, and his voice got harder. We get people like you all the time. You need to leave now, or I call the police. And I wish I could tell you I stood my ground and caused a scene, but I looked down at that little baby starting to fuss in his stroller, and all I could feel was fear, fear of cops, fear of losing him, fear of being that story on the evening news about some agitated woman at a rich man's gate. So I did what a lot of us are taught to do. I swallowed my pride and I left. After that, I told myself I had tried. I told myself, you came, they shut the door. It's on them now. I went back to working 2 jobs and raising Jaden, and reading those letters sometimes late at night, when he was asleep, wondering if I had failed him, or if this was just the way it was always going to be. Just me and him and a bunch of what-ifs. Fast forward a few years, Jaden is 5 now. All skinny legs and endless questions. He's one of those kids who seems to feel everything at volume 10 when he laughs. It's loud enough to fill a room. When he's scared, he clings to you like the world is ending. One morning after my bakery shift, we were walking downtown, me with flour still dusted on my arms, him with syrup on his shirt from a rushed breakfast. The city moving around us in that usual messy rhythm. And this older white man in a gray suit walks past us moving like he had somewhere important to be, and everyone else was just background noise. I didn't think anything of it at first, but I felt Jaden's little hand tighten around mine. He stopped mid-step and stared. Auntie, he whispered, that's him. I laughed. Because what else do you do? Baby, there are a lot of old white men in suits out here. But he shook his head, eyes wide. No, that's him from the picture, that's Grandpa. And my heart did this weird little flip because I knew exactly which picture he meant. The one of Daniel and his father together, that had been tucked in with the letters, the one I had shown him when he started asking about his dad. Before I could answer, I made what I thought was a harmless adult decision. I saw the bakery door, thought about the empty bread box at home, and said, stay right here, I'll be 1 minute, I'm just grabbing bread. In my head, a minute was nothing. I had no idea that 60 seconds could be long enough to change a life. I stepped inside, grabbed a loaf, turned around, and the spot where I left my nephew was just empty. There are a lot of bad feelings in this world: heartbreak, embarrassment, anger. But that flash of pure terror when your child is suddenly gone, that's something else. My stomach dropped. My heart started pounding in my ears. I threw the bread back on the counter and ran outside, spinning in circles, yelling his name, ignoring the looks from strangers. Then I heard it. That crying, that raw, panicked crying I told you about. Not the whining kind, not the "I want toys" kind, the kind that sounds like something inside is cracking open. I followed the sound down the sidewalk and saw him. My little boy sprinting after that same man in the gray suit, stumbling, face red, tears, streaming, people moving out of the way, some staring, some pulling out their phones, because of course they did. The man turned around with this irritated look like he was swatting away a fly. "Stop running at strangers," he snapped. "Go back to your guardian. I don't have time for this." And Jaden just screamed louder, "Don't leave me again," and grabbed onto the man's jacket with both hands like he was grabbing onto the last piece of land in the middle of the ocean. By the time I got close enough to hear them, the man was gripping Jaden's shoulders, not hurting him, but definitely not gentle either. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Where is your aunt? Where is your father?" And Jaden, hiccuping, shaking, managed to get it out, between sobs. "Auntie said to find you. Auntie said you're the man from the photo. Daddy said, Daddy was your boy." I swear, the air around us shifted. The traffic noise dimmed. The man's whole face changed. His eyes went from annoyed to something like haunted, like someone had just dug up a ghost he'd spent 5 years trying to bury. "What did you say?" he whispered, voice cracking in a way that didn't match his perfect suit. "What did your father tell you?" And my nephew, my baby, repeated that line from the letter that I had read 100 times, but never out loud to him in that exact way. He said, "If anything happens, go to Grandpa. He'll know what to do." That was it. That one sentence snapped something in that man. His briefcase slipped out of his hand and slammed onto the pavement. People actually jumped at the sound. He staggered like the sidewalk tilted, his eyes filled with tears so fast it was like a dam breaking. And right there in the middle of the city, this millionaire, everyone called cold and strict and untouchable, dropped to his knees in front of my nephew and pulled him into a hug so desperate it hurt to watch. "Oh God," he choked out. "Oh God. I didn't know. I didn't know about you. I failed your father. But I am not leaving you." That's the moment I finally reached them, lungs burning, grocery bag swinging from my wrist, heart halfway out of my chest. "Jaden!" I screamed, grabbing him from the man's arms. "You can't run like that. I told you 1 minute, just 1 minute." He clung to me, sobbing, but still looked over my shoulder at the man like he was afraid the guy might disappear if he blinked. The man, Richard Hale in the flesh, stood up slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand, trying to rebuild that wall around himself, but his voice was still shaky when he looked at me. "You're his aunt," he said. It wasn't really a question, more like he was confirming something he already knew. "You knew my son." I was breathing hard, adrenaline still roaring through my veins. "My sister knew your son," I shot back. "She died having this child. You're the one who didn't know him." I watched that land like a punch. He flinched just barely, but he didn't look away. "How did he know that sentence?" he asked quietly. Those exact words no one else heard, that except me and Daniel when he was a boy. That was our promise. And it hit me right then that I was standing in the middle of a sidewalk, holding the living proof that some promises really do echo past the grave. My hands were shaking, as I reached into my bag and pulled out that worn envelope I'd started carrying again, like some part of me knew this day was coming. Because this should have been in your hands 5 years ago, I said, and passed it to him. Watching him open those letters was like watching someone read their own autopsy report. His whole body language changed. With every line you could see him remembering arguments, choices, the last things he said to his son by the time he reached the last letter. The one about bringing the baby to him, no matter what. His mouth was actually trembling, and he had to sit down on the ledge of a storefront because he couldn't keep his balance. I told him about coming to the gate, about getting pushed away, without anyone even bothering to look at the proof, about walking back to the bus stop with a crying baby and a heart full of rage and shame. And for the first time I saw something on his face I never thought I'd see on a man like him. Genuine, ugly, heavy regret. How many times have I built walls so high the truth couldn't even climb up? He said, mostly to himself, and for a second, nobody around us said anything at all. Then a patrol car pulled up nearby, one of the officers stepping out to see what all the commotion was, and that's when Richard did something that completely threw me. He didn't shut down, didn't walk away, didn't throw money at me to disappear. He turned to the officer and said, in that firm, businesslike tone they probably heard in boardrooms, "Officer, this is a sensitive family matter. I want these letters authenticated, and I want a DNA test between me and this child today, through official channels." And before I could even think, we were all in a squad car heading to the station, me holding Jaden's hand, Jaden holding Richard's 3 people connected by a man who wasn't alive to tell his own side of the story. Inside the station, under bright fluorescent lights that make everyone look a little guilty, they took the letters, scanned them, compared handwriting to old records of Daniels at the DMV, or school files, whatever they had. At the same time, a nurse came in with swabs. Jaden looked scared, so Richard sat down next to him, took his hand and said, "It's just a little tickle in your cheek, okay? We're doing this together." And let the nurse swab him first like a kid, just to show there was nothing to fear. And I sat across from them thinking, is this really the same man whose gait once swallowed my pride whole? While the tests were being processed, I told the officers the full story, no sugarcoating. My sister, the pregnancy, the accident, the letters, the day at the gate. And one of them, a younger guy, actually looked ashamed and said, "We fail people like you too often." Which doesn't erase the past, but it felt like someone had at least noticed the bruise on my life instead of pretending it wasn't there. After what felt like forever, an older officer walked back in with a sealed envelope. The room went so quiet I could hear the vending machine humming in the hallway. He handed it to Richard. "Mr. Hale, the results are conclusive. You are the child's grandfather. The match is 99.98%. And for a moment, nobody moved then. Jaden tugged on Richard's sleeve and whispered, "Does that mean you're really my grandpa now?" Voice shaking with hope and fear all tangled together. Richard didn't answer with big speeches or dramatic lines. He just pulled Jaden into his chest and held him longer and gentler than I'd ever seen him touch anything in those photos in the paper. And he cried again, but this time it wasn't the sharp grief from before. It was softer, like something inside him was finally breaking open in the right way. "I failed your father," he said quietly, "but I swear to you I am not going to fail you." Then he turned to me and I braced myself, because this is where people like me get cut out. I was ready for, "Thank you for raising him, I'll take it from here." You know, that polite kind of dismissal, but instead he said, "You raised my grandson when I didn't even know he existed. You did it while the people around me shut you out and judged you by the way you look. I can't change what happened at my gate, but I can change what happens next. You are family now if you're willing to be, and you will not struggle alone again." I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't trust it right away, where I come from. Big promises usually come with tiny print at the bottom, but over the next weeks, he backed it up. Legal paperwork that actually had my name on it in ink, that meant something financial, help without strings attached. Apologies in places where other people had watched me get turned away and stayed quiet. He even fired the head of security who had dismissed me years ago and told his staff, "If a woman ever comes to my home saying she has proof of family, you let me handle it. You don't get to decide whose story matters." The day he chose to go public about Jaden was another one of those "is this real life" moments. Media vans lined the street in front of his mansion. Cameras pointed at the front steps, and there we were. Richard in another perfect suit. Jaden in a new little shirt. He picked himself me in a borrowed dress that still had the tag tucked in the back, because I fully planned to return it. Reporters yelling questions, flashes going off like lightning. Richard raised his hand and waited for the noise to calm down. Then said into a row of microphones, "This is my grandson for 5 years. I didn't know he existed, not because of him or his aunt, but because of pride, fear, and the way class and race and power can build walls around the truth that ends today. I will protect him with everything I have, and I want to thank his aunt who stood in the gap when I was too blind to see it." You should have seen their faces when Jaden, tired of all the attention, leaned into the microphone and mumbled, "Grandpa, can we go home now? I'm hungry." The crowd laughed. The tension popped like a bubble, and Richard, eyes glassy but smiling, said, "Yeah, kiddo, let's go home." And for the first time, home didn't sound like a rich man's mansion or my cramped apartment. It sounded like somewhere in between, where a little boy wouldn't have to chase love down a sidewalk, begging not to be left again. So that's my story. Our story, really. A gate that was closed, a promise that refused to die, a kid who wouldn't stop running, and a man who finally stopped running from the truth. And I want to ask you something, because this is the part where your opinion matters more than mine. If a child showed up in your life claiming to be family, with nothing but a story, and maybe a few worn pieces of paper, would you open the door and find out, even if it meant facing your past and your prejudice? Or would you shut the gate and tell yourself it's probably a scam, even if that meant living with a maybe for the rest of your life? Tell me in the comments what you honestly think about what Richard did, about what I did, about how many people get turned away at invisible gates every day. Hit like. If this story hit something in you, subscribe and turn on the bell. If you want more real, messy human stories like this, and if you've ever seen or lived through something similar, class, race, family secrets all crashing into each other, share it, because you never know who might need to hear that they're not the only one standing on the wrong side of a locked gate.